Okay, lesson 10.3, solving quadratic equations by graphing. So, you have been dealing with quadratic equations for quite some time, and we can factor them down. And once you set them equal to 0, which was just on our prior test, x equals 1 or x equals 5. Okay? You can also solve it by graphing. So if you find the axis of symmetry, and if you find the coordinates of the vertex, once you got the coordinates of the vertex, and if you make your chart, your XY chart, and you can find out where the points go, and then you just find out where does it cross. Where does it cross? So, to me, I think it's just going to be, which one would you rather do? Would you rather factor it out? Would you rather factor it out and get the two binomials that you would then have to set equal to 0 and just know that those are your solutions? Or would you rather find the axis of symmetry using this, and once you get your axis of symmetry, which for this one would be 3, and then plug that back into the original and get your y value to find your vertex, and then plot your points this way. If you're a grapher, if you really like it, then this might be the way for you. Because I know that most of you are not, I'm going to say this is probably how you would choose to solve it. That is the way I would choose to solve it. I do think it's quicker than this, but feel free to do either way. So basically what you're looking for on this lesson, you are looking for the x-intercepts, because the x-intercepts are the solutions to this equation. Notice if you would have factored these out right here, you would have got 1 and 5. Where does your parabola, if you extend it, where does it cross the x-axis? 1, 5. So your solution's either going to be what you get right here when you factor it out, or if you were to graph it using the finding the vertex, finding the axis of symmetry, plugging in numbers, where does it cross? Okay? And this graph is only as good as how good you graph it. I mean, if that makes any sense to you. So if you're kind of crazy with your graphs and yours don't cross exactly at 5, that's not going to work for you. If yours cross at like 5.5 or even 5 1/4, just because you're a little off, that's not going to help you much either. So it would be my suggestion to you to solve it by factoring, which I think by now we've had a lot of practice with that anyway. So this one, if I were going to solve this by factoring, here's your first thing. You have to write it in standard form. So this 3 has got to come over. So that would be x squared minus 2x minus 3. And then if you take that over there, it equals a 0, because now there's nothing over there because you took the 3 over, if you subtract 3 from both sides. Okay. So I'm looking at this. If I were to factor this, what will multiply together to get a -3 and add together to get a -2? Well, you know it has to be an x and an x. Multiply to get a negative and add together to get a negative. It means your negative has to be bigger. So a -3, and add 1. Again, equals 0. So if it's -3 plus 1, then you know this has to be x is equal to 3. Whoops, not that. X equals 3, and x equals -1. Now, look over here where they graphed it. Crosses the x at 3, crosses the x at -1. These are the solutions to that, because those are the x-intercepts. Now, they all won't come out so nice and easy every time. That one had 2 solutions just because that's how it happened. Okay? Sometimes they don't always have 2 solutions. Sometimes there's 1. So let's try this one. Negative x squared plus 2x equals 1. You have to write it in standard form first. So negative x squared plus 2x. That is an awful looking 2. But again, when the pen doesn't always work, you take what we can get. Minus 1 equals 0. So we never have a negative lead coefficient, so we need to factor that negative 1 out. Come on, pen. So if we factor that negative 1 out, I will be left with an x squared minus 2x, and take a negative 1 out of there, makes that a plus 1. I feel like an old grandma writing this slow. Maybe I should bring out my old grandma voice. Yeah, I bet you'd all love that. Okay, so now that we've got that, factor this down. OMG. Parentheses, please. What can you multiply together to get 1 and add together to get a negative 2? Well, you know that the x has to be there. The only thing you're going to multiply together to get 1 would just be 1 and 1. But the problem is that it's add together to get a negative 2, which means that these had to be negative ones to begin with. So notice that these are both the same answer. So when I set them equal to 0, I'm going to get x is equal to 1 and x is equal to 1. So basically I just have one answer, x is equal to 1. So it's the same process, you're just going to get a different kind of answer. And anytime that only has one x-intercept, it's going to look something like this. Basically that the vertex is the only point that touches, okay? Could go up or go down, but anyway, it only crosses one time. Could also happen that they never cross, such as in the case down here where it says no solution. Okay, if we do this, and if we do factoring, bear with the slow writing. I know it must be torturous to watch this. Plus 7 equals 4x. Get it in standard form. X squared minus 4x plus 7 equals 0. Here's where you run into a problem. Well, here's where you run into a problem. You can do the x and the x that we've got. There's only two whole numbers that multiply together to get 7. Either it's going to be a positive 1 and a positive 7, or a negative 1 and negative 7. And the problem is that neither one of those pairs will add together to get a negative 4. So if it can't happen, then there is a no solution, and that's what you write. Now, if you would have done this by graphing, here's what you would have found. You would have found a parabola that never touches the x-axis. So if it never touches it, and the answer is the x-intercept, and it never intersects it, then it can't have a solution. So that's the reason why the answer is a no solution. Okay, so you're going to have two answers if your parabola crosses two different times. You're going to have one answer if your vertex is the only one that touches, so it looks something like that. Or you are going to have 0 answers, so no solution, if your parabola looks something like this. Okay, and that all is summed up for you in this next chart right here. So, number of solutions. If it crosses it twice, you will have 2. If it only crosses it once, you will only have 1. If it never crosses it, you have 0 solutions. So, real quick, let's look at the factoring part of this one. And again, that's supposed to be a parenthesis, and this pen hates me. Come on, honey, come on, honey, come on, honey. And there it is again, being a stinker. All right, so what could you multiply together to get a positive 8 and add together to get a negative 6? because you know the sum is negative, that means one of these has to be negative and one's positive. We know an x and an x. So it's a positive 8. Sorry, I so did that part wrong. If it's a positive 8 and it adds together to get a negative, you know it has to both be negative because there's no way a positive and negative is going to give you a positive. My mistake on that. So negative 4, negative 2. So my answers are not negative 4 and negative 2. You have to set them both equal to 0. So my answers, 2, it's supposed to be a 2, 2, 4. Those are the 2 points where it crosses. This one, standard form, I would have x squared plus x plus 1 equals 0. There is a problem whenever you're looking at this. There aren't any numbers that will multiply together to get 1 and add together to get 1. The only thing that you're going to get for 1 would be negative 1, negative 1. Nope. Positive 1, positive 1. Nope. So if nothing works, that is a no, come on, no solution. And that's what you write, no solution. Okay, one last one. Putting this in standard form, I would have negative x squared plus 6x minus 9. Factor out the negative, negative 1. I would have a positive x squared minus 6x and a positive 9. What would multiply together to get a positive 9 and add together to get a negative 6? They would both have to be a negative 3. X minus 3 times x minus 3. So, as you can see, there's only one solution because it is the same solution. X would be 3. And that's not a Ghostbuster negated sign. That's just, again, faulty pen. All right, last one. Just talks about zeros. Zeros is no different than finding the solution, what we've been doing this whole time. So if it's finding a 0, it's just asking you to put a 0 in there. Put a 0 in there. Factor, like, oh my gosh. Factor like always. So in this one, it would be a multiply together to get a negative 7, and add together would be a positive 6. It would be a positive 7 and a negative 1. X plus, x minus. So that's it. And if you notice right here, when you set these equal to 0, x would equal negative 7, and x would equal a positive 1. Okay. With that, we should be good.